Hi everyone, and thank you very much, Chandi, for that introduction. These are my credentials actually, and what is perhaps relevant to this presentation, maybe the last two, which I have highlighted in blue. And what I'm sharing with you is a culmination of my study of over probably 30 years or so, from comparative religion to philosophies, including Vaisheshika, Nyaya, Samkhya, Vedanta, Upanishads, Advaita, in addition to both Theravada and Mahayana traditions in Buddhist philosophy. This also helps me to relate these to tourism as well. Now, this lady, Roland Strauss, she was the Miss World in 2014. Initially, she was Miss South Africa, and she carried the initial word across to some communities after I handed over the book that I launched, which also paved the way for me to conduct meditation sessions for tourists. And it was doing quite well. While I was teaching, I was doing these meditation sessions during the weekends. And it was like probably, I have conducted hundreds of them until the COVID hit the industry. So I'm looking forward to recommence this probably from next year or so when the tourism industry recovers. The meditation that I conduct is a combination of samatha and vipassana, or it's from, in Pali you call it anapanasati to kayagata sati, converted into a language that the audience understands. So that's what I do. Now, spirituality in the 19th century embraced everything, from religions to philosophies and various religious practices, including traditions and rituals. Now, by the 20th century onward, there is a demarcation between religion and philosophy. So for many decades, the scholars were trying to define these terminologies: what is spirituality, what is religion, what is philosophy, and the quest to establish the proper definition will continue probably for the next several centuries. I'm not sure. Now, this is not a very good model, but it's a reasonable model to explain what is common between spirituality, religions, and philosophies. But again, it's not conclusive because these are definitions, ideas, terminologies, nomenclatures. It's very difficult for anyone to establish something and say, well, this is because there is a commonality between all this. Why? Because there are many unanswered questions. Because you may have noticed that, the philosophies, the followers of philosophies are very proud to say that, you see, we are not theistic believers. We don't believe anything, but we follow philosophies. Now, I don't want to mention anything here because talking about religion and philosophy is very controversial, and it's also very sensitive because they are very close to the hearts of many people. But even philosophies, be it Buddhism or Hinduism or anything, there are many teachings that rest on beliefs again. If you look at some of the teachings and ask yourself the question, okay, where does this come from? Again, it comes from a belief. Okay, so that's something most of the followers of philosophy don't even accept. they retaliate if you say this to them, all right? And there are many assumed correlations. You know, we tend to establish correlations between one thing to another. Like, okay, you do something bad, you end up in hell. It's a correlation. And it's an assumed correlation. And obviously there is no evidence and there's no one who will take us to show what the hell looks like. And then there are a whole lot of post theories. Now this is what really led to the modern spirituality. All these things what attributed to the emergence of the modern. Now the post theories, it's very interesting, even in business parlance. I don't know, Chandi might not agree with me, but in business parlance, we have many scholars and business leaders coming and telling us, you know, if you work hard, you can be a billionaire. Or if you're smart, you can be successful. You know, a whole lot of post theories. And we don't know if they're really true. In which case that every business school will produce Mark Zuckerbergs and Bill Gates and so on. In reality, they are not really true. Okay, it may be, maybe not. And then in the spiritual seeking or spiritual travel, more and more people are looking for experience because that's all they have. Nothing else. It is your own experience that can tell you whether there is something that we need to grasp or not. Again, there is no evidence for spiritual achievements also. I mean, there are many people who claim themselves to have been enlightened, but we don't have evidence for that. The easiest way that, you know, if you are getting into this subject, the easiest way that you can test someone's ability to speak on this spirituality is whenever something is related to you, whether it is a religion or whatever, you just simply ask the question, how do you know? And wait for the answer. The respondent will say, oh, that is stated in the book, or it is stated in some literature somewhere, or someone else told me, or someone else who is a religious leader told me. But again, it's not substantive enough for us to accept. In fact, I have done this like a research. I used to ask this question from many people who are, and they retaliate. Sometimes they retaliate with a lot of anger when you ask this question, how do you know? When you say, okay, this is it, you know, some religious nuance. And when it is said that, okay, how do you know? And you get this thing. And of course, there is a new paradigm for spiritual seekers. And this new paradigm has some predominant features which I'm trying to share with you. These are definitions, and I'm not going to spend much time, but I have underlined some of the important ones. The complexity of these definitions surfaces how the definition tourism or the spiritual tourism evolved over a period of time. And this is 2001, they were talking about spiritual tourism means it encompasses everything. Religion, philosophies, even if you go to a church, even if you go to a mosque, even if you go to a theme park or wildlife safari, still it is spiritual. That's how it was defined way back in 2001. By the time they came to 2012, there was some characteristic where they were talking about consciousness, spiritual betterment. This was a little different to what was discussed previously some decades ago. Just before COVID, we saw Rao came up with this definition. Perhaps it gives the demarcation between religion and the spirituality. And he says spiritual tourism is connect your body, mind, and soul, while religious tourism is to seek blessing from God. I mean, reasonable enough. Perhaps, again, this can be debated, this can be argued, but it has at least some kind of a demarcation. All right, so spirituality is for these. and it's a self-discovery. It's identifying the true nature of life, whereas the religious travel is connected to visiting places that are linked to religiously important places. All right, so now in order to substantiate what I mentioned about the journey from religion to philosophies to spirituality, I'll show you some of these places, and that will shed some light to what I was talking. Now, SK was talking about Jerusalem. And you could probably, again, it is subject to correction. You could easily say this is something connected to religion. It's a religious travel that prompts people to visit a place like Jerusalem based on the history. Now, SK was also talking about Mecca, the visiting to witness the Kaaba. And again, we can call it's connected to religious travel. Tirupati, it's more faith-based than religious. I mean, this is for God Venkataraman or the Vishnu, or it is devoted to Tirupati. And it's more than the location, it is faith, because you go there and you make vows, you fulfill vows. And incidentally, this is the largest exporter of human hair to the world. And 30 to 40,000 people per day, it's phenomenal. And I'll tell you, the collection of money, no one knows. And they have machines to separate the various coins, and it's like a factory where they collect the money. So it's more faith-based. Take our own place, Sacred Tooth Relic, Kandy. We could probably reasonably say it's a faith and devotional based, because the location is not connected to Buddha's journey, but basically the place is it's venerated with the Sacred Tooth Relic, and therefore you can say it's a faith and devotional. And Vatican, it's more pilgrim oriented. It's a pilgrimage to go there, and that is what prompts people to visit them. I don't want to mention the figure there, 6.9 million, and just to show the SK was talking about Lumbini. Again, I'm sorry, there's a typo. It should be pilgrim and devotional based. That's where Lord Buddha was born. Now, this is a turning point from philosophical to modern spirituality. Rishikesh used to attract a large number of Hindu devotees for many, many years. But in the last 20 years or so, the place turned out to be a place for yoga, spiritual discussions, and large number of visitors used to go there. And they're discussing many matters based on Upanishads, Advaita, the teachings, which express the need to some kind of practice. So there is a practice. The practice part is coming in, which calls for at least a retreat, maybe a few days. You go there and then indulged in various techniques, meditation, walking meditation, living with the nature, and so on. Then Plum Village in France, and this is Thich Nhat Hanh, the famous Vietnamese monk. And it is moving from philosophy to more meditation. I mean, he's a Mahayana monk, but there are a lot of meditation techniques. So people go there and stay there for a week, sometimes 2 weeks. And that was evolving from this original pilgrim faith to this type of visits. Amaravati is again a place where the meditation is emphasized over and over and over. But again, this I have met several Buddhist monks who have been in Amaravati, and they have in fact derobed. And in my research, I have even found out why they have derobed. But this is not a place to explain all that, because it's religious practice means that, you know, you have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you do the sweeping and cleaning and mopping, and then you have to memorize all the sutras, all the abhidhammas. And then most of them whom I have met, they have derobed and said, look, I was going in search of something. But rather than, I was asked to gather knowledge. So the knowledge that Chandi was referring to, Chandi, in the modern spirituality, knowledge is a barrier, really. It prevents you from seeing the reality of life, because you are stuck with so much knowledge. And I mean, take the reality, I mean, to take the bull by the horn, some of the university professors, they give such a hard time to their students when they go to do masters and doctorate research, and to refine their research to ensure that these research studies come up with unbiased kind of finding. But when it comes to religion and politics, they are the number one, the segment that groups in the dark, right? And they are the blind followers. Look at the reality; it's totally different to what you and I would otherwise think. Tiruvannamalai is also something close to Rishikesh, moved from Hindu practices to spiritual discussion. And I mean, this place was originally dwelt by Ramana Maharishi, and then subsequently Punja took over. And Muji today is one of the leading spiritual gurus, is from Tiruvannamalai. And these have this element of some practices, discussion is allowed, Dharma Sakacha is allowed, which is not the case even in Sri Lanka. Where do we have Buddhist discussions? Where do we allow people to raise questions? A Buddhist monk comes and he offers the sermon, and then he gets up and go, and no one is allowed to ask. And I was wondering, like any of the audience members, I'm not trying to be critical or controversial, but to raise, how do you know? No one raises that question. If something is communicated, you go back and say, how do you know? And you can probe into this search, because you are the one, and in Buddhist philosophy, say you yourself have to say this, right? You can't get it from someone else. So if that is a reality, then you have a million questions to ask people. Okay, so the emergence of modern spirituality and the movement starts with why people want to go to places. What do you really look for? Yes, if you want to fulfill an obligation, yes, there is a religious pilgrim. There is a faith-based location, depending on your belief and which religion that you belong to. Or a once-a-lifetime opportunity like going to Kaaba and getting the title Hajia. Okay, that's fine. There's a place. But the crucial people for destination, for the tourism marketers, is to find out why. Why do people go to places? What are they looking for? So the modern spirituality emerged from that last one, which you can see. They're looking for the truth. What is the truth in life and existence? And the other one, which is even more crucial, is the way out of suffering. The suffering is a common terminology, but you name it, from fear, stress, anxiety, worries, all that. People live their entire life carrying all this burden. And today, the modern spirituality seems to be offering something. I mean, altogether, spiritual tourism, we have about 300 million people traveling across the world, before COVID, of course. Of them, 40 million accounts for this lot, the people who are searching for the truth and the people who want a way out. I mean, they have got all the material benefits in their lifetime. They have achieved everything. Maslow's hierarchy of whatever the self-actualization, they have got everything. But finally, there's something missing. There's something missing, and they want to go in search of that. So it has created new destination. Bali used to be a beach destination. Not anymore. It's now, today it's yoga. Today it's wellness. Today it's meditation. Today it's spiritual discussion. I mean, Bali has regular yoga conferences. And you go to Kerala, which was such a popular destination for Ayurveda. And today they are moving towards more spiritual practices. And this, I love, I always cite this location, Monte Sahaja in Portugal, because Mooji moved from Tiruvannamalai to Portugal, and he established this Monte Sahaja. And before COVID, trust me, thousands of people, they take the flight in the morning. They listen to this guy for 1 or 2 hours. They take the flight back in the evening. What is he communicating? What is his message? I mean, you can go to any Google site, YouTube, and type Mooji. You can listen to some of the sermons. Of course, he has brilliant vocabulary, English, you know. I mean, he's a Jamaican who lived in UK for a long time and then went in search of all this. And then finally he became. And one of the things that is guaranteed there, at least it is said to be guaranteed, is the experience. Everyone who comes out of Monte Sahaja says, it's such a relief. And the tension with which I have been carrying in my whole life, it's gone. But I still have my problems. I still have bills to pay. I still have to work hard. But that thing that was bothering me inside, I don't know what, but it's gone. Now that is what the modern spirituality is. So to talk about some of these are actually the fellows who, the spiritual leaders who broke the fences created by philosophies. Be it Buddhist philosophy, be it Hindu philosophy, they broke the fences and took the people to a new paradigm. I mean, Deepak Chopra, his explanation, I mean, he's a medical doctor, he's living in America, he's a millionaire. He has written about 60 books so far. And how he establishes that entire life that you believe is an illusion. It's an optic illusion. And Eckhart Tolle is the one who advocates this. All you have is now. And Sadhguru, you can actually study them, and these are the ones. And they created what we call the moving destination. That means there are no fixed location wherever they go. Like the Barmy Army following English cricketers, you know, they follow them. So the tourism elements come in. They have to travel. They have to take a plane. They have to stay somewhere. And so this is spiritual tourism connected to moving destination. And that was what resulted through this modern spirituality. Now, before I end, this is the most radical spiritual leaders in the world now. Starting from Tony Parsons to Jim Newman to Lisa Kang to Francis Lucille, Naho Wada, Kenneth Madden. And the problem is, if you had listened to them 10 years ago, you would have rejected them outright. Not anymore. And trust me, when they start their discussion, they will probably say, look, my message is not for you. You won't gain anything out of this. You will be disappointed from what I have to say. But who will, after hearing this, who will sit and continue to listen to it? So the modern spirituality has created that audience. Okay, he still has something to say. Let's hear it out. And these are the most radical guys. If you go to their YouTube channels, hundreds of thousands of hits. And they also travel around contributing to this moving destination. And you can see how they conduct the meetings through these pictures. I'm trying to, I mean, each gathering has maybe about 50, 100, but that itself, I mean, these are all high-end. There is a dream bus. Who is driving the dream bus conference happening in California? And you have to spend about probably $10,000 to go and attend that conference. But there are people who can afford it, right? And then you have various other locations. And then you have the SAN conference, which is also happening in New York. Very expensive, but people still go to these locations. So nature of destinations in terms of modern spirituality moved from static. Pilgrim had been static, religion has been static, faith-based has been static, philosophical, spiritual awareness, then started the modern spirituality with prescription, like the Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra. They have a prescription. They give you a prescription so that you can follow it up. Then there are radical modern spiritual leaders who have no prescriptions. They only give a description. And if I may, before I conclude this, I just want to say that if you recollect the people whom Jesus Christ associates, they are not the business tycoons or the professors or university professors or all the scholars or academics. I mean, they address the average type of people because they were the people who were receptive to their message. And Lord Buddha, whom he preached to, Ujjuttara, Sunita, Sopaka, who are they? They were untouchables at that time. And they're supposed to have understood what Buddha was trying to communicate. So finally, basically, the history between mass tourism to alternate tourism, and it produced the different types of the tourists in terms of the destination had to gear themselves to cater to them, and that resulted in all these types of tourism, from medical tourism to nautical to cruise tourism, and then it got further refined into slum tourism, proco tourism, dark tourism, doom tourism, and the future, since all of us are one way or another involved in tourism, this is the future, because the future tourists have different travel preferences. Baby mooners, and you have B-leisures, and you have vacation people, and you have digital nomad travelers. This is going to be the future. Flashbacking and spa-faring, staycation, workation, and spiritual tourism also got fragmented into the same way, like from faith-based to pilgrim-based to philosophical-based to the modern day. And this, I'm trying to depict the whole thing together. It's wellness, yes. It's freeing the mind, yes. It's relaxation of the body. And above all, it is seeing the true nature of life and existence. And that is what spiritual tourism is all about. Thank you very much, and for your patient hearing.